Hello and welcome to the Overly Animated Podcast, where we take animation seriously. We provide fan-oriented and analytic discussions on a variety of animated shows, movies, and anime, including Steven Universe, Gravity Falls, and Rick and Morty. I'm Dylan Hysen, and today I'm going solo, talking about the Studio Ghibli 1995 film Whisper of the Heart. This is probably the only time that I will be doing a solo podcast on probably for anything, but I thought this was a good time to experiment with the solo discussion format, which is not really a thing. This is going to be more of a personal monologues rather than our typical discussion format. But this is the best topic to try this out for. I've been wanting to try it for a while, and today I'll be talking about Whisper of the Heart, which is my favorite film of all time. So this is definitely the best choice for trying this out, and it's a film I have a ton to say about. It's extremely interesting. There's a lot of, the movie itself, a lot of people would not find extremely interesting, but I do, and there's a lot going on around it. Today I'm going to talk about my personal feelings for this film, how they've changed over time, because I've kind of called this film my favorite for like 10 years, and I've been a changing person since then. I haven't seen it in 4 or so years, so what were my feelings on it on this rewatch? I'm going to talk about the film itself and all the various different elements of it, which are extremely interesting. The historical background of this film, which was kind of a big pivot point in Studio Ghibli's history. This is a great time to get into subs versus dubs. This film has one of the most controversial dubs of all time. I've heard it been called the worst dub of all time. Spoiler alert, I heavily disagree with that, but it's a very interesting topic relating to Whisper of the Heart, and I'll get into that. And I really want to discuss the main character, Suzuku Shukushima, who is one of my favorite protagonists or just characters of in any film. And yeah, so overlyanimated.com is where you can find out everything about this podcast. Normally there is more than just me on, if this is your first time listening. And we're trying to go through every Studio Ghibli film, in addition to every Pixar one. And we're almost getting there kind of in terms of the non-Miyazaki films. That's one thing to bring up to start, is that this is a non-Miyazaki Studio Ghibli film, although I would say this is the most heavily Miyazaki and non-Miyazaki film. He wrote and storyboarded this entire film, so that is basically just heavily involved in both the writing side and the direction side. Ultimately, this movie is directed by Yoshifumi Kondo in his only directorial work for Studio Ghibli, unfortunately, because he shortly passed away after production of this film ended. It was extremely tragic, especially for Studio Ghibli and the history of it, because Miyazaki was trying to take his foot off the throttle at this point in terms of production in Studio Ghibli, and also Takahata. They're trying to turn over the company to a younger generation, and Kondo was their first choice. He'd worked on other films in other Miyazaki films and just Studio Ghibli films in general, and he was extremely talented. You can see it on display here. This film is incredibly gorgeous. It is wonderfully paced and directed. I have absolutely nothing bad to say about any of the direction work on here. It's like a lot of people would criticize it for being slow, but I feel like it is purposely slow, and it functions very well as a really low-key, relaxing kind of film. I'll come up with a better description for that as we go on. But yeah, so the plan was Kondo was gonna become the main director of Studio Ghibli after this, and he passed away after it, and that kind of had a big impact on Miyazaki, who said, wow, this guy was working incredibly hard on Whisper of the Heart, and he probably died from that. That's a very Japanese way of looking at what happened, but it's probably apparently that was his diagnosis, was he worked too much, and he was overexerted. And so that caused Miyazaki's first retirement, that exact thing, first of many, and then he came back for Spirited Away. And since then, this also probably prompted the shift to digital for Studio Ghibli. Miyazaki finally relents, Princess Mononoke is the last major hand-drawn animated release, like purely hand-drawn without any computer use in the world. I think, at least that's what I've heard, and that's just incredibly exhausting to produce. Miyazaki just and Kondo and everyone else at Studio Ghibli just spends all their time hand drawing literally everything, and they're the last, kind of stagnant non-changers in the animation department there. And then Miyazaki comes back for Spirited Away, and he relents and it goes digital, and he's able to keep producing movies for some time after that until his recent retirement now. So there's the big background surrounding Whisper of the Heart. It's lost in all of that is, I think this is an incredible classic. I've called this film, Whisper of the Heart, the queen of slice of life films. And I would like to affirm that belief after seeing it again. It is the most slice of lifey thing that I've ever seen. Let me define terms slice of life. A movie that purely takes place in the actual world. There's no fantasy elements. And it's just kind of a low-key, some people would say trudging, or I don't view it as a negative, but it's just very slow-paced, low-key, just, a literal slice of someone's life, the main characters, right? And this is the biggest one of them all. Here we have the main character, Shizuku, and the first hour of this film is not really about anything, and it's just about Shizuku's life and establishing her for the second hour, which then becomes kind of a romance movie, kind of a personal journey type movie, which is related to the romance in really interesting ways, which I think it does better than probably any other film ever. One of the main themes of this film, which is an extremely Japanese theme, which is trying to improve yourself and do your best for the person closest to you. Which, and I've probably said very Japanese twice now. It's not really stereotyping. It's just it's just a different cultural type thing. The concept of ganbare, which is like doing your best in Japan, is extremely, you hear that all the time in any work from Japan. Do your best, and it's just something that doesn't really resonate here. But that's like encouragement there, is always wanting to strive and improve yourself, and it's like fully on display here. A very like Japan specific view of a romance. Also, you could argue it's not really about the romance, more about Shizuku's personal journey, which is how I saw it this time. In the past, I've thought that this was an incredible romantic film, and since then, that was kind of my view on it in my high school years, early high school years, when I was really getting into all of the Studio Ghibli and Miyazaki films, and I was really into romances like love, like the typical. Normally, it's like a teenage girl type thing, but that was for me in all the personal media that I was consuming. And since then, I really don't have that perspective anymore. I mean, I still appreciate romances in films. One of the big aspects is that I've kind of broadened my worldview to include non-heterosexual romances, and it kind of is a game changer, because a lot of these heterosexual romances are kind of predicated on like this innate forces of love between a boy and a girl, and to me that's just not. That's something that I've shifted my perspective on. I still am really into like the bond element of romances, like the relationship, two people's bond, not as much into the mystical kind of any sort of predetermined type thing, which is a little bit on display in this movie. So it's a little conflicting for me watching it again. It's because Shizuku and Seiji are, I don't know, it's weird. They a little bit in the first half of this film is like it's like a teen film, and like the leading up to of boy meets girl and kind of everything that goes into that. By the way, someone keep track of how many times I say because that normally annoys me on the podcast. And now I'm the only one talking, so of course it's probably like 50 or above. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, there's a few ways to view the first hour of this film. The whole like let's not use the word that I'm thinking of using, but the pre-romance period of Shizuku and Seiji, which you could view as like this kind of mystical predetermined period of them meeting each other and stuff. Of course, we learn later that it's not really predetermined. It's Seiji kind of trying to take action of some sort. But the way I viewed it this time was more of, this is just very much like young people, like children, how they handle like feelings for one another. The whole elementary schoolers, like teasing, the guy teases the girl who he likes, right? That's almost how I view Seiji's actions now in the beginning. And I think that's kind of how it's supposed to be. They're not that young. I mean, the characters in this film, I'm pretty sure are supposed to be in the equivalent of our ninth grade. Because in Japan, high school begins in 10th grade and goes 10th, 11th, 12th. Middle school goes up to 9th. And of course, also in this movie, you see on display the fact that high school is something you have to like get into in Japan. It's not just something that you just instantly go into. You have to like take a test, get into a high school. It's almost like college for us, but they also have college. It's a university. Yeah, so... Okay, well, I'll get back to that. I wanted to mention, I kind of got started getting into things fast, and I thought we're already at 11 minutes here. I watched this film subbed this time. In the past, I have almost exclusively watched the dub of this film. I had seen the sub before. This is, as my favorite film, I've probably seen it, I've probably seen the dub 5 or more times, and I've seen the sub once before, and now I'm watching the sub again. Because that's another different perspective change that I have now, is that I've rather watched subs now, even for Miyazaki films, which I don't think is right. I also don't think it's wrong. It's just Miyazaki has said that he'd prefer people to watch his films in their native language. And I think that is a really valid approach, especially for fantasy films. But for me, I've talked about this before on the podcast, slice of life films, I just get a lot out of watching it in the native language, because you pick up on Japanese cultural elements that are lost in the dub. Some can't be translated over, and some are specifically taken out to make it more relatable for American audiences, which gets into the big changes that this film made. The dub of this film, okay, I have a lot of love for the dub of this film. Shizuku in the dub is voiced by Brittany Snow, who everyone knows now is being in the Pitch Perfect films, and I love her as Shizuku. She's so wonderful. Yoko Hona's voice, the original Shizuku voice, is a little different. I almost view Brittany Snow as the original because I've seen her as her more, and that's my perception. I think watching it again, I really like how I view the film with Yoko's Japanese voice in there, because I think the main difference I feel like is that Yoko's voice sounds younger than Brittany's voice in the Shizuku role. And I really feel like, okay, apparently 14 years old, Shizuku says Wikipedia, 14, 15, 9th grade period, yeah. I feel like this film, at least the way I want to view it now, is as Shizuku as a child. Because, that's kind of what she really is. This is the coming-of-age, finding-yourself type movie for Shizuku. And Brittany Snow's voice maybe makes her sound a little bit older. I still obviously love her in that role, as I said. But anyway, the main changes of this film are at the end, in kind of this iconic ending scene. Iconic to who? To me, I guess. I don't know who else loves this film other than me. Where Shizuku and Seiji are on whatever cliff watching the sunrise come up, and it's like the clouds are obscuring or the mist is obscuring the city, and it's like it's ocean, and it's these great visuals. The English dub changes how the movie ends. It's very odd, because before that, this film, the dub does everything right for this film. It is just so on point in terms of what they're saying, almost exactly. The big change I noticed this time is that one of my favorite Brittany Snow line reads from the dub, when her older sister throws her down the letter to mail. The dub Shizuku says, "It's a love letter, isn't it?" And I always remember how she reads that, because it's great. And then in the sub, apparently she's saying, "Your boyfriend." So, I mean, it's the same thing, right? But like that's the biggest change I noticed before the ending is just saying things in a slightly different way. Most of the time, they're saying things almost exactly. I mean, of course, we got to get into the country roads part of this in a second, but at the end, there's the two main differences. So, at the end of the original sub, Seiji actually proposes to Shizuku, basically. I mean, it's not a real proposal, but Seiji says, "Will you marry me?" Right? So that's a literal proposal. In the sub, Seiji says, "Can you see us getting married one day?" So that's a pretty big difference, even if it's a pretty similar line of dialogue. Now, why is this 14-year-old asking Shizuku to marry him in the original? Well, Miyazaki, in one of the most old person things I've ever heard, explains that young people these days never commit to anything, and I wanted Seiji to actually commit to something. That's basically almost his exact quote from when he gets asked about that. That's such a Miyazaki thing to say. Just such an old person thing to say. It's something that would not make sense in the United States, I believe. So I can understand why they changed it. I don't know if this makes any sense in Japan, but it seems more realistic in terms of young people committing to each other. Just the entire Japanese like school love system is much more committal. It seems like, the whole if you have a crush on someone, you give them a love letter and then they accept and then you're like dating. It's much more formal and committal than anything here. To me, it seems a little silly, but it's different. It's different cultural things, and you could just see it. It seems just much more like things happen and that's how they are type thing. So I think that makes more sense there. I don't have a lot of problems changing it to "Could you see us getting married someday?" I also think it's kind of in the spirit of that line, because they're not actually getting married. It's just "Could you see us getting married?" Okay, so that being said, it relates to the second big change, which is Seiji's fate at the end of the film. In the original subtitles, yes, Seiji says, he doesn't say anything. The dub adds something in. What happens is, in the original, Seiji he's back for a little bit. He accepts the offer to make violins in Italy and goes, and in the future, it's implied that he's going back for 10 years, says Shizuku earlier. He's going to come back to graduate middle school, and then 10 years until he's going to be back in Japan again. So that's insane, right? That also makes more sense in terms of why he's proposing now, because he's not going to see her again for 10 years. And of course, the intent is that they're going to write and encourage each other, as Shizuku's friend says, all the time. And at the end, Shizuku says that's what she wants. In the dub changes this to Seiji, they add a line. I think when they're riding the bike up to the hill, I didn't rewatch the dub for this, but Seiji says, I'm going to stay for high school, and then when I graduate high school, I'll go and do the apprenticeship in Italy. So in that version, they're going to be together for 4 more years before he goes off. So if you're going to, it's probably that they decided to change that line and then the married thing came after that. Because if they're staying, then them getting married right now doesn't make any sense because they can't. I don't know marriage laws in Japan, but theoretically they would not. And if he's going now, then you can say commit to, and you can get engaged and then get married when he comes back in 10 years. That makes sense. So I don't have issue with the marriage line. The Seiji leaving thing, I don't understand why they did it culturally. I can only imagine that they did it because because they would view that as kind of a depressing ending, to have your male lead in a romance just be gone for 10 years, and they wanted it to capture kind of the spirit of a happy ending, which it was. So maybe they thought the will encourage each other from long distance would not translate as happily in Japan as it would here. This one I'm not as thrilled with. Personally, I don't I mean, how I personally view the film, I kind of like the way it ends in English more in terms of what I would prefer to happen to have all the characters be happy. But I don't like changing the intent of the film just because it will make your audience happier. That's kind of not the point. That you're kind of losing this message of self improvement and finding yourself at the end, and you're kind of making it more about the romance. I think the dub tries to make it more of a romance, and in the sub, it's more of this story of Shizuku finding herself, culminating with her still being alone for 10 more years, although having someone long distance to talk to and stuff like that. And I really just I don't love that change specifically. That being said, as even though this is the most major part of the film, the ending, in any other film this would be a minor scene, right? This is the biggest plot development in this film because nothing happens. But in here it's kind of big, and even though we're changing like the climax of the film, it's not the worst because the film still mostly plays the same. So I still do really love the dub. Despite of the unnecessary plot change at the end involving Seiji's fate. And I love kind of all the voices involved in it. Ashley Tisdale plays Yuko, Shizuku's friend, and she does a wonderful job in that. And Brittany Snow and Ashley Tisdale together, there's the one scene where they're singing Shizuku's lyrics to Country Roads, which I'll talk about in a minute. And it's really wonderful. And I got the sense, I actually maybe love that scene more in English. It's also good in Japanese, and it's the same thing, them singing together, and it's really wonderful. But it's almost like you totally get the sense of their best friendsness in Japanese, or in English with the dub. So, in conclusion, the dub I think is good. It's despite the change at the end, I think it's one of the better dubs I've seen. It's, in fact, I think a lot of the voice actors have captured their Japanese counterparts so exactly that I honestly couldn't tell the difference between a lot of these performances. I think Shizuku sounds slightly different, and I think almost all of the rest of them are like exactly the same. Even Ashley Tisdale, who does a wonderful job as Yuko. So a lot of props, on the dub for this, for those all involved with it. Other notable thing about this film being in English is the use of John Denver's "Take Me Home, Country Roads," which is, I haven't even talked about that. We're 20 minutes in, I haven't talked about that element of the film. It's just integral to the film, this John Denver folk song. I don't even know when the song came out, in 1971. The film takes place in 1994, and it's released in 1995 in Japan. And it's how odd to have this John Denver song be the theme song, the ending credits, used in the film, sung by the characters. And here's the oddest part, is the dub. So in the original of the film, they're singing Country Roads translated from English to Japanese, and the characters are singing it. They use a version of it, not John Denver's version, in the opening credits. Do they use the English version in the opening credits? I think so. They use Olivia Newton-John's cover in the opening credits, and then they have Yoko Ono's singing it in the end credits, I believe. And so in the sub, in the original Japanese, they're singing Country Roads translated from English to Japanese. In the dub, they are singing Country Roads translated originally in English to Japanese and now back to English. Because they kind of make Shizuku changes the lyrics and stuff for what she's writing for their class song or whatever. And what an experience watching this film in English, where the original song is from, translated to and from Japanese. It's very odd that this is kind of the theme song for this film, but it's so charming, and it's one of it's I don't know, it's not integral to the film, but it's so awesome and interesting, and such a notable part of the film. You kind of forget about it at some point because that's part of this first half establishment. Maybe you could argue that this film takes too long establishing everything, too long expositionally, but I think it's just so integral to introduce Shizuku and Shizuku's world in such a kind of excruciating fashion. I don't think it's excruciating, but this film, 111 minutes, so under 2 hours. This is the longest 2-hour film I have ever seen in my life. This is the most bang for your buck you will get watching any movie, because I I was blown away when I looked this up recently. I swear this movie was 3 hours, but it is not. It is under 2, and I don't know how that works. This first half of the film, to me, the highlight, one of my favorite sequences in this is Shizuku taking the train, meeting who we later learn is Moon the cat, and then following him to the and Seiji's grandpa's place it ends up being, and her talking to, I always want to call Seiji's grandpa the Baron, even though that's the cat statue. He doesn't really have a name in the film. His Nishi is his surname, and we know that because there's confusion with it, and I love the exploration of this scene. It's like Shizuku just discovering this new wondrous place. You can tell this is the best job at conveying her kind of sense of wonder and exploration and like loving like stories in the beginning of a story, and this just succeeds so well in doing all of that. I love how they portray the cat. I love how Shizuku follows the cat on her interactions with the cat on the train. It's like, does he know what he's doing? I guess he got out at the right stop. I mean, this film really only has one fantasy sequence, and it's intentionally. I mean, it's split into 3 parts, but it's from Shizuku's book, which ends up being called Whisper of the Heart, the title of the film, and but this scene is almost a fantasy scene because like how does a cat know where it's going on the train, but then it ends up just following. I wonder if this is almost realistic because it seems like the cat notices the landmark and then knows to get off at the next one. At least I feel like the film almost tries to make it realistic. Like a lot of props to Kondo and Miyazaki for that. I buy it actually, despite the fact that it makes no sense. And just the entire thing with the clock and the story between like the dwarf king and the fairy princess, then Shizuku's wonder at that and her interactions with the grandpa, aka Baron, who I will now refer to as Baron for that's the time being, though Baron is a different character. And that's just so wonderful. It's the film at its slowest, and it's also the film at its best, I think. The other kind of notable parts about the beginning is everything with what's his name, the male whatever who the friend likes, and then the male student who the friend likes, and then ends up liking Shizuku and everything, Sujimura, and then everything around Sujimura. So I think this is the weakest part of the film. It's fine until we have the kind of confession scene between Shizuku and Sujimura, and I feel like I didn't love that scene. I don't know if it's always kind of been one of the weaker parts because it doesn't involve the main romance. It doesn't involve Shizuku finding herself. I think I don't know if it's a necessary part of the film, but I understand how it functions for Shizuku's character. I don't love Sujimura's actions in the scene. It's not great, but also it does a lot for kind of building up to where we're going with Shizuku and her being lost, and it's like, how does she react to that? How does she relate to everyone around her and stuff like that? So, I don't know. Those are notable parts at the beginning. Everything with Shizuku and Yuko's, like I said, them singing together and stuff like that in the beginning is all wonderful. Shizuku's interactions with her older sister and her parents, they're all just extremely realistic, of course. Studio Ghibli does an incredible job always with that kind of establishing just realistic portrayals of family relationships. Always does a great job. Then we have the second half, and we have the extremely quick kind of bonding between Shizuku and Seiji. Of course, we have the setup with him checking out all the same books as her, and we have him teasing her. And then one time, the first interaction, when he says, lose the concrete roads. Shizuku writing concrete roads is so wonderful, by the way, that sequence, and then laughing together when they're singing it. And then he says that, and then she goes home saying, I think the Japanese was jerk, and then in English it's stupid jerk, stupid jerk, stupid jerk. I definitely remember that part, which I guess that's like a translation type thing because it needs to be to match the number of syllables because she keeps saying the cadence of it over and over, right? And Shizuku being so thrown off by that and stuff like that. But that's all kind of, it ends up being all just so irrelevant, right? In terms of them just jumping off so quickly into their relationship. it's probably necessary for them to feel so comfortable with each other right away. They feel like they had this courtship, even though it was just this like very young school kids teasing each other type courtship type thing. And but then once we get the scene with Shizuku is sitting, sitting next to Moon the cat, and then Seiji comes up. They talk about the violin stuff. They start singing "Country Roads" again for like the fifth time in the movie, which is wonderful. And then the grandpa and his friends come in. And they're all singing together. That scene's so good. I love that scene. And then it ends with them just fighting about her not knowing Seiji's name before. And grandpa and friend's reaction laughing at it, and and the audience reaction is to laugh at it, like, oh man, that's how wondrous, like what a great capturing of kind of this young love in terms of their interactions with each other, and how I don't even know how to describe it. Just it's like they're having this negative interaction, but it's not actually, negative. It's just them getting everything out there so they can get past it or stuff like that. I don't even know if that's a good way to describe what's going on, but it's hard to describe, I guess. That all rings very true to me, and just is really sympathetic portrayal for the two characters. The other great scene, Seiji coming up to her classroom, and then all of the classmates just, reacting the way they do to that. That's such a great portrayal of how, how obsessed all in animes, how Japanese school kids are with any sort of romance that happens in school. Because it's like a bigger deal, right? Kids going out in Japan is maybe more commitment than in here, United States, not here because you may not be here, but it's and then they just all follow her up and they're spilling out the door. That's so funny and so just wonderful and bright. And then their discussion on the roof is really great. Then of course the last scene with Seiji coming to pick Shizuku up and them going, Seiji's like, I imagined I calling your name and you would come out, and then you were, and then they go up there and then they talk about everything, and the real version of the film, he's going back, but will you marry me? And then, as I talked about, it's a really great scene. It's a little hard to understand culturally, but maybe not culturally, just relate to like what's going on. It's kind of this complex thing. They're not going to see each other for 10 years. That's kind of a long time. Kind of, yeah. When they're 14, for sure. The big thing I guess I want to talk about, as somehow we are over half an hour, in terms of me, into this. So let me kind of conclude by talking about this personal arc for Shizuku. I really love Shizuku. She's so sympathetic. She's so real. She's so relatable, and just this wonderful female protagonist. One of my favorites of all time. In terms of my relations to her, when I was 15 watching this film, I was totally in love with Shizuku. I mean, she's great. Why wouldn't I be? And now it's like weird watching it 7 years later, and it's Shizuku's just a little kid. Like, that's kind of how I took it this time. It's just a lot of her mannerisms and her actions and stuff are very kind of immature, intentionally, right? Because this is her finding herself. And it's weird having this disparate view on her kind of from before, and I can just remember watching it before too, so it's interesting. I also think that Yoko Ono, as I mentioned before, plays Shizuku younger than Brittany Snow does. I don't think Brittany Snow is intentionally playing Shizuku older. I think it's just how it comes out because her voice is like that. So it's much easier to see. It's like just to see Shizuku as younger, and I think that's how you should see her in this. Her love of books and her love of storytelling, and then she goes on this thing with Seiji, which is the main thing I want to talk about in terms of, it's like, I don't think the main point of this film is her romance with Seiji. It's nice and all, it's nice and all finding true love at 14, if that's what it really is. I mean, this film does not have a skeptical bone in its body in terms of wondering whether that's actually true love or not, but that's not the point, right? The point is Shizuku ends up thinking that she should like further her what's she gonna do with, she has one great line at some point And she doesn't care about studying for the high school entrance exams. She doesn't know what she wants to be doing, and she ends up deciding she wants to try to write after reading all these books, and trying to like better herself. And there's the whole thing with the unpolished gem, and then or not the rough gem, and you have to find the thing inside, right? And then it ends up. Her story includes lapis lazuli, and it's like nice Steven Universe reference there. No, not actually, but that's that's how I saw this now. It's like lapis lazuli, what? Okay, and it's kind of interesting. It's hard to comment on, right? Because on one hand, this film almost says that we need to find our place in society. Like it's almost easy to read it as that, which is something that I wouldn't be super sympathetic to, but also, it's about finding yourself outside of the strict confines of social expectations, which I think is evident in the scene where Shizuku is talking to her parents, and the dad ultimately encourages her to, do what you want and come back to the exams later. And he says you can find yourself outside of what everyone expects or something like that. Don't remember the exact line now. And I think that's a great thing. That one I can be really sympathetic to. And it's her like, on one hand, I have complicated feelings towards this. On one hand, it's like she says, okay, I need to have a specific goal. I need a specific thing. And I don't know if I can relate to that too much, right? In terms of her write her exact mission to, I'm just going to write this book, and that's like me finding myself and stuff like that. But I also don't think that's the point either, right? I think it's just her exploring what she not to just aimlessly read books and here's the corny tagline to come up with this movie, not to aimlessly read books and be enthralled in other stories, but to find her own story. I feel like that's kind of one of the main points here, is that it's she's literally writing her own story, but she's also finding her own story with Seiji, with her interactions with her friends and stuff in school, Yuko, and just finding her place in the world and what she wants to do, and what she wants to literally do, but also how she wants to view the world. And because what's great about Shizuku is that she's disillusioned with her role in terms of what she wants to do in life and society and stuff like that, but she still has this wonderful, like, wondrous sense of approach to the world. She goes outside and she sees the blimp, and she's in an extremely Miyazaki move. She's like in awe of the blimp, and she's like, today's gonna be a great day. And that's just so sympathetic and so wonderful. Miyazaki, of course, loving blimps and aircraft and stuff like that. And it would totally make sense that his heroine in the film, even though this is based off of a manga, of course, although I can't assume not too heavily based, right? It could be, though. But Miyazaki putting his own touches into Shizuku. That's what's so great about Miyazaki written films, is he's not afraid to have female leads. He has so many of them, and he puts himself into female leads. So many male writers just like can't wrap their head around how they could write a female character from their own perspective. But Miyazaki just says it's this young girl, and I'm just going to approach it in terms of maybe how I viewed the world when I was young. I mean, I'm assuming, but that's just such a refreshing thing to see. And I just love this outlook that he gives Shizuku. It's so relatable. Like, what other 14-year-old character do I think is captured how I felt that much at 14? Like, I was kind of hadn't found how I viewed society or anything like that, and I still really haven't, honestly. But it's just also, and it's kind of like having this almost kind of depressive look on the world, but still kind of being upbeat about things. Like, things still make you, there's still positives and stuff like that, and capturing that is kind of difficult, right? Because a lot of times it's either all out depressed or all out yay, right? And life's not that simple, really. There's things there's times when there's depressing things, and there's times when the incredible world we live in, makes you wonderful. I'm just trying to describe Shizuku's perspective here, right? And I feel like that the Miyazaki in writing this film captures it more than probably any other character I've seen. And he does it in this 14-year-old girl who is finding herself. It's almost the perfect character to do it with, I think. Coming of age of this young person. I feel like it's a perfect way to approach it. So I really love Shizuku. I love this this finding yourself, bettering yourself element of it. It's hard to describe. It's especially hard for us to wrap our head around, because I feel like if I was Japanese, I would have a more solid. It's like you have to try to understand this almost foreign concept, and then it's not a completely foreign concept, right? But just the emphasis on it and the relation to how that relates to society, because other people are just how other people view doing your best and stuff like that, and rambling, but me. But yeah, it's hard to describe and relate to, but it's something that works incredibly well, and it's something that justifies this romance, not because the romance kind of isn't super central to the film, and it's kind of wonderful at points, and I just love how it interacts with the main character and the main character's journey for self-discovery and for coming of age. And ultimately, I think that this film is a character study of Shizuku. That's why I feel like the things that don't relate to Shizuku as much, the things that involve Ashley Tisdale and Sujimura are Yuko are like kind of the weakest points of the film, because this is a Shizuku's film, and it's about her character and everything about her, and that's not super elegantly expressed right now by me, but I think when me and Sam were talking about on the My Neighbor Totoro discussion we had, it's like films are usually either plot films or character studies, but My Neighbor Totoro kind of is neither. It's kind of a thematic exploration, which is where we ended up with that. I think this film is purely a character study, and it's almost a thematic exploration too, kind of, finding yourself. That's a typical theme in movies, but it's expressed really well in this character study of Shizuku, who I think is just one of the best characters of all time, in my opinion. Okay. Anything else about Whisper of the Heart? I mean, there's a ton. Like, this movie really is jam-packed with them. I didn't talk about the fantasy sequence. I feel like that's one of the weaker points of the film as well, because it's not super related to Shizuku. And it's her story, and it's nice to see her story, but I don't know if it's super necessary. So Seiji's character, I don't think he's that important, but he's kind of interesting, and once we really get to know the real Seiji, it's nice. I love the Baron, and also the story of the Baron. I don't know why we got that insert thrown in about how him and Luisa, and how he needs to meet her again, and that the Baron finds the other statue too. There's a lot of stuff in here. This movie maybe could use 15 minutes trimmed for a more succinct thing, but it also is just great at establishing everything around their world. So yeah, Whisper of the Heart, probably still my favorite film of all time. In conclusion, I hadn't seen it in a while. It's still incredibly wonderful. And it's like what all slice of life movies should strive to, in terms of character study, in terms of themes explored, in terms of world building. And I maintain its realm with its reign as queen of slice of life films. So there you go. I'm Dylan Hysen. You can find out more about this podcast at overlyanimated.com, and you can support our Patreon at patreon.com/overlyanimated. Thanks to our current patrons, Shayna, Mitch, Cordell, Beatrice, Nate, Andy, and Jamie, aka Hannah, Mitch, Fever Mitch, Cordell University, Beatrix Exchange, Buzz Like Your Mailman. We really rely on your support for this podcast. No time period specific in terms of when I'm recording this. No Moonbeam City discussion tomorrow, because Delaney's busy. We'll probably double up on episodes next week if we continue with the show. But we will be covering tomorrow's Steven Universe episode then. So that's all. Let me know what you thought of this, me just rambling on and on in terms of this. I honestly don't know how I talked for 45 minutes, and I don't remember what I said, so that'll be interesting. Let me know what you thought. It's probably not something I'm going to be doing anyway, but I would still appreciate the feedback. And thank you very much for listening, guys. Oh yeah, I guess I can plug myself. Dylan OVA on Tumblr. You can let me know there, and Dylan_OVA on Twitter. And I'll see you next time, guys. Bye.